Good evening. Today I'm going to be discussing issues surrounding housing affordability, which is sometimes referred to as the housing crisis here in the United States. To sum up the scope of the problem, I'd like to pull some data from Schaefer with Pew Research Center, who says that half of Americans say housing affordability is a major problem. Furthermore, 70% of Americans say young adults have a harder time buying a home than their parents' generation. In 2020, 40% of Americans spent more than the 30% recommended income on rent. Even more so, 23% of Americans spent more than 50% of their income on rent. Rent has increased by 18% over the past 5 years, which has outpaced inflation in the CPI. This suggests that we do have an housing affordability problem here in the US. One package of policy that's been proposed to address this problem is the Biden administration's Housing Supply Action Plan. It has 5 points to increase the housing supply in the United States, and I'll touch on a couple here. One is for the administration to reward areas with zoning reform. Second is to finance multifamily housing and accessory dwelling units. And then third is to implement a low-income housing tax credit, which rewards developers who create affordable housing for low-income residents, particularly owner-occupants. Two strengths of this package include increasing the supply of housing in a multitude of ways. One, by incentivizing zoning reform so that single-family zoning might be rezoned into multifamily zoning or mixed-use developments. And two, is that this piece of policy acknowledges multiple root causes of the housing crisis. I touched upon zoning, but it also looks at the commodification of the housing market in which investor speculators see housing not so much as shelter and a necessity, but as an investment, which drives up costs. Two weaknesses of this policy proposal is that one, that particularly tax credits and tax changes require congressional approval, and not much gets done in Congress these days due to partisan divides. Second, we will see municipal pushback, particularly from powerful, wealthy, single-family municipalities, but market incentives that incentivize mixed use and higher density development in residential communities might be helpful by giving greater priority to grant funding to communities that implement these reforms. I have two recommendations, one for the executive and one for the legislative branches to lean into these housing reforms. One is for the executive branch to really lean on zoning incentives, using market-based reforms which are much more palatable to the average American rather than by force. Second is for Congress to certify tax credits for builders of multifamily housing for owner-occupants, not for speculators. So, in summary, housing is an issue. We have a policy proposal coming from the very top of the president's administration that needs action by both executive decree as well as by Congress, and I hope both get passed.